In this video, we're going to take a look at the terrain following radar provided by the AN AAQ-13 Lantern pod on the F-15E Strike Eagle. Alright guys, welcome back aboard the F-15E Strike Eagle for the Combat Ready series. I know it's been a while, but we've got additional capabilities for the aircraft, one of those being the terrain following radar. And I honestly just learned how to use this yesterday, so I'm going to try to go through it while it's still fresh with me. So let's go ahead and get a look at the things that we need to know, which switches we need to flip. And again, this is the Combat Ready series. This is designed for you to just kind of get in and be able to use the system at a basic level. If you want to learn more about how in-depth you can get with the system, highly recommend you go check out Notso's channel. I'll put a link down in the description notes. And he's a former F-15E strike crew member, and he could talk about it a lot more detail than me. But we'll just talk about the basics. So looking over here on the left side, we've got the terrain following radar switch, and we've got, of course, the radar switch. We're going to need to be able to use both of those. And just forward of the throttle, we've got the terrain following couple switch. And that'll allow us to couple the aircraft, the autopilot with the radar, and it'll be able to do some maneuvers on our behalf. And then, of course, we have the main autopilot, which we can find up here hitting the AP button. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in flight. Over here, left of the throttle, is the fly-up switch. It's a guarded, covered switch, so you really shouldn't have to mess with it. But that allows the aircraft to initiate a fly-up maneuver. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. Over here, we've got the terrain following radar page. We can just find that on the first main page over here on the left side, TF. Go ahead and click that. And we'll go through some of these things here. We'll start up here at the top. These are the clearance levels, and as we change the settings at the bottom, you're going to see these numbers change, but this is essentially what you're telling the aircraft, the terrain clearance that you're looking for. So 500 feet right here, 200 feet, so on and so forth. Going around the left side, these are much like when you are using the air-to-air radar. You've got the different frequencies to sort of offset from other members in the flight. To avoid any sort of overlapping, essentially jamming or stepping on each other. You can change these numbers here. Soft and hard has to do with how hard the aircraft is going to make maneuvers on your behalf when you're in a coupled or autopilot mode. Now the manual says that the soft mode right here will select an incremental G command range of minus 0.45 Gs to 2 Gs, and in hard selects a range from negative 0.9 Gs to 2 Gs. So it essentially has to do with the hard over a negative G. Down here at the bottom, you've got their sub mode. So norm is probably where you're going to spend most of your time. ECCM is electronic countermeasure, and essentially what that's going to do is limit the vertical scan of the radar. The idea being is that the radar is not going to look as high, therefore should be harder to be detected by aircraft on the other side who may be looking for you while you're flying around down low. Weather is going to also adjust the radar scan depending on the environmental conditions. So you can swap these between weather 1 and weather 2. You can see up here at the top that it's changing those parameters, because essentially if you're in weather 2, you're limiting what the radar can detect, and the range and the azimuth and the vertical scan. So it's only going to give you this level of protection. So the book says that weather 1 should be used in light rain, has a smaller vertical scan compared to that normal range, that normal mode. And it also has a limited maximum command range. And then weather 2 is going to be used for moderate or heavy rain, and it offers only these two clearance levels at 500 and 1,000 feet. Now LPI is the low profile mode. From what I understand, this does not actually work in game, but this should limit, kind of like ECCM, it's working in such a way that limits your ability to be detected while using the terrain following radar. Because again, there's going to be certain situations where you may not want your radar on at all, but obviously you need it for this maneuver. So by having that, it's at a lower setting and hopefully not detectable. And VLC is your very low clearance. You can see that it opens up another option, which gives us 100 feet. You should only use this over relatively flat terrain or over the water. It's not advised to use in mountainous terrain or with sudden changes in elevation. So we're going to go back to norm and just leave it there. Now here in the middle, and this won't make a whole lot of sense until we're flying, this is your steering commands. You can see this line. This is essentially the line that it wants you to steer to. So you'd be turning the aircraft over to get that line there. This is the raw video antenna position. Not sure that you necessarily need to know that, at least at a basic level. Here you've got your radar, altimeter, and your ground speed. That'll obviously change as we get going. And then your minimum en route altitude. So the aircraft will potentially do what's called a fly-up maneuver. That's in case it violates some basically some protections in the system. The aircraft's going to try to pull up and fly up, and this is the altitude it's going to try to reach for you. That's in case something happens, say you black out or just something goes wrong with your terrain following. And of course we can see that we are in a standby mode. We can turn on the radar here on the ground, but it's actually not going to come on because we've got the weight on wheels switch. So we're going to have to get up into the air to do the rest. And the last thing we'll just talk about is getting this thing started so we don't have to talk about it while we're flying. All right, so to get this thing going, once we get in the air, of course, we're going to have to make sure that our radar is on, that the TF radar switch is on, and that we've got our auto fly up set however we want here on the left side. And then that should be good, but we just need to make sure that we're in limits for the aircraft. One of those things is airspeed. It's not going to want to kick on unless you're at about 400 knots ground speed or less than 650 knots. So in that range is where it's going to want to operate, or about 360 on your calibrated airspeed. You also want to make sure that your radar altimeter is on. You can find that over here. Should default to the on position. And of course, here on your menu page, go to data. You can actually turn that on and show that here on your HUD. But you want to make sure that that is on as well. And then just make sure that the aircraft is not in some sort of crazy bank angle or dive. So the book says that the limits for pitch are a 15-degree dive angle, a roll rate of 60 or less, and a turn rate of 5.5 degrees per second with a turn acceleration of 2.2 degrees per second. Basically, don't be banking this thing. Don't be doing some crazy dive. Just kind of get it generally where you want it, and then you should get what you need to either do the manual guidance. You'll get a little box. We'll show that here in a second. Or you can flip that couple switch and let the aircraft do the work for you. Now, when we hit the couple switch, all it's going to do is pitch the aircraft for you. It's going to go up and down, but you're going to control the turns. When we talk about the autopilot, and again, I've not had a lot of luck with it just because I think in general right now, as I'm making this video, autopilot's a little bit borked, but it should do the turns for you. But we'll talk a little bit more about that in flight. Let me taxi out and we'll get going. Okay, so as we taxi out, I'm going to go ahead and turn on my radar, but I'm not going to turn on the terrain following radar. Actually, I'll turn it on outside of limits, and that way you can see what it's going to do unless you get within that speed limit. Because generally, if you turn it on now, of course, on takeoff, you're just not going to be at the right speeds for it. It's going to act funky. So I'm going to leave it off so it doesn't try to do any fly-up maneuvers while I'm in a critical phase of flight, and then we'll flip it on at a lower airspeed once we get established. All right, so I'm going to turn on the ground speed so that we can see what we're doing. As we said, we needed about 400 knots on the ground speed. We're at 300 now. I'm going to go ahead and turn it on just so that we can see what happens. And we can see its airspeed on our, we're getting some notifications letting us know that things aren't good. And if we start doing some weird turns, it might start trying to bump up. See, this is unarmed fly up because of airspeed. So we're going to go ahead and flip it back off for now until we get established. We're almost there. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is just try to fly the manual mode. It's not that it's hard. It's just it's very exacting because it is trying to keep you at a very narrow margin because of the altitude you select. So you're going to get a tiny box to work with here. So we're within limits here. I'm just going to pull back a little bit on the power. Usually it seems about 87, 88 is a good speed or a good engine setting. We're definitely within the speed parameters. I'm going to just pull us out of this turn a little bit here. All right, that's good. All right, now we're going to turn it on, and you can see we've got that box. And what it's trying to get us to do is put our flight path vector in that box. And that's going to give us the clearance that we're looking for, which right now is 500 feet. And again, don't get focused on the MSL. It's that radar altimeter is what we're talking about. So essentially, if we keep our flight path vector in a box, and of course it's going to modulate because of the terrain, and it's trying to anticipate. You can see here it's actually looking, that's sort of a side view of what the radar is seeing. And that's going to help us. So let's go ahead and lower it down to 300 feet. And it's going to average it out with this undulating terrain. You know, it's not going to try to keep you at 300 feet the entire time. If it detects that the terrain is coming up, it's going to make some adjustments. So, you know, you can see as we cross this little valley, we're only going to be, what, 800 feet, even though we're set for 300, and we're pretty much on the box. All right, so that makes sense. Now let's go for the coupled mode. Let me get turned here just a little bit. See, there's that turn up rate. See, I exceeded that turn up rate, and now the aircraft is going to want to fly up. Okay. And what it's going to try to do is climb to that minimum en route altitude. And then we got past our airspeed. Okay. And it's going to keep trying to do that now that we're violating the airspeed. So let's get back down. I'll turn it back on, and I'll show you again what kind of happened there. All right, so we're back on. We're back in manual mode. You see these carrots right here, and this is what happened. Is I turned too hard. I wasn't thinking about it because I was talking. Once you get past this, we're gonna get right on the edge of it. We're okay. If you get a little bit past it, see the turn rate. If that turn rate stays, I think it's about 2 seconds. If it exceeds that 2 seconds, then it's gonna go up into the fly up mode. You can see as long as I stay within that turn rate, we're okay. All right, so let me get past this hill, and then we'll turn on the coupled mode. All right, so here we go. Coupled mode. Now, I am not doing this. The aircraft is doing this. I'm going to do the roll. I'm controlling the roll rate. But the aircraft is doing all the pitch maneuvers. Of course, I've got to make sure that it's got a power setting that allows it to do the maneuvers. But that's totally the aircraft doing those pitch maneuvers. And as long as I maintain the roll rate within those limitations, we should be good. Because the way to think about it is the pod can only see so far to the left and right. In fact, if you'll notice, it can see better to the right than the left. So if we exceed that turn, then the pod doesn't have the ability to see what it's trying to avoid. And since it doesn't know then what to pitch, it'll initiate that flight maneuver to keep us safe. There's that turn rate. And you can see it's just sort of averaging out and saying, okay, the boss wants to be at 300 feet. I need to do this to clear this next obstacle by 300 feet. So let's see what it gets. I'm just going to hold it steady as possible. There we go, 310 feet. So it's not going to just, you know, zip up and down on you. And we're in the hard mode, so it should be more willing to take a negative G dive. All right, so let's talk about what to do when we do exceed a limitation and we get that fly up maneuver. But for tactical reasons, we don't want to let the aircraft climb up to 15,000 feet or whatever we've got as our minimum en route altitude. So I've got us on coupled mode right now. I've got the paddle switch mapped, and I'm gonna just exceed the turn rate. We should get that turn rate message for about 2 seconds, and then it's gonna execute the fly up. So right now it's just gonna continue to fly up. I'm gonna hit the paddle switch, and we've got an unarmed setting. So now I can manually control the aircraft. It's still giving me all the messages, but you can see it's unarmed. So now I'm going to release the paddle switch. Now the aircraft should go back into its coupled mode. We'll see what happens. Oh, there it is right there. That's not me. That's the aircraft recovering. And we'll talk about the autopilot. So again, it's been a little bit problematic. But what we're supposed to do is hit the steering mode. Autopilot's initiated. Maybe it'll do it now. The waypoint's actually behind me. So we'll see what happens. I'm not initiating this turn. And see, the aircraft's trying to get past the turn rate, and now it's doing a fly up. I didn't even initiate that turn. So yeah, so right now the autopilot seems to be a little bit borked. I don't know. I was flying with somebody yesterday, and they were having zero problems with it. Mine would not latch on to the waypoint that I wanted with any autopilot mode, no matter what I was doing, terrain following or not. But that gives you a basic understanding of what the system can do for you. Hopefully it's a little bit helpful. I haven't tried it at night or in poor weather. I'm sure that's where it's really going to shine, because quite frankly, I could do just as well a job during the day clearing those obstacles. But now you got a basic understanding of what it's supposed to do. Hopefully this helps you get started. And again, check out Notso's videos. He's going to go much more in depth on this stuff. He understands it a lot more, so you can nerd out over there. I just want to get you guys started for those of you who follow along with the Combat Ready series. I appreciate you guys watching, and we will talk to you next time. Take it easy.